Good morning, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll see who all's online also, but we'll start off with introductions around the room. I'm Gary Beatty, STAC Chair from Eastern TPR.
Good morning. I'm John Cater with Third Highway, Colorado office.
Vern Hersink, San Luis Valley TPR.
And Brian Pettit, I'm with the Intermountain team.
Heather Paddock, Region 4 RTD.
Jared Verner, Pikes Peak Area Cog.
Holly Williams, STAC Vice Chair and Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments Representative.
Elizabeth Relford, North Front Range MPO. Liz Hyde, North Front Range MPO.
Vince Rogalski, Chairman of the Gunnison Valley Transportation Planning Region.
Mitchell Wardell, Warfno County Commissioner, South Central TPR.
Brian Blasey, South Central TPR.
Diane Barrett, Commissioner for District 1.
Brian Cirkbenek, Chair for Northwest TPR.
Good morning, Eva Cosaleon, PACOG MPO.
Dana Brissa, Grand Valley MPO.
Good morning, Tim Malone, Upper Front Range.
Evan Pinkham, Upper Front Range.
Aaron Willis, CDOT, Statewide and Regional Planning Section.
Marissa Gahan, CDOT.
Herman Stockinger, CDOT Deputy Director. Darius Pockpaws, CDOT Division of Transportation Development Director.
And Michael Snow with DTD. I'll pass this around here.
Phil Von Hake, CDOT.
Spencer York, CDOT.
Good morning, Rachel Peterson, Grand Valley MPO.
Bill Schiebel, Federal Highways.
Aaron Busto, Federal Highways.
Jesse Spencer, CDOT Region 3. Josie Thomas, CDOT Region 4.
Jim Houston, CDOT Region 4.
John Gardaki, CDOT Region 1.
Good morning, Jordan Rudel, CDOT Region 1.
Jacob Rieger, Dr. Cog.
Kathleen Collins, Statewide and Regional Planning.
Okay, I think that got everybody in the room. Who all do we have online?
Patrick Girton, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Patrick Girton, CDOT OFMB.
Stephanie Gonzalez, Southeast TPR.
Jamie Collins, STIP Manager, DTD.
Heather Alvarez, Southwest TPR.
Becky Carrasco, North Front Range MPO.
Dana Wood, Intermountain TPR.
Wendy Pettit, HACOG.
Dwayne McFall, Fremont County Commissioner, Central Front Range.
Jack Powers, Region 9 Economic Development District, Southwest TPR.
Tim Funk, CDOT Region 5.
Jennifer O'Haron, Northwest TPR.
Liz Young, Winnie, DTD.
Commissioner McLaughlin, District 8.
Emma Belmont, Federal Transit Administration.
Okay. I think that got everybody. Thank you. Welcome Transportation Commissioners that are attending. We'll start off with approval of the September meeting minutes that were presented in the.
Mr. Chair, we would like to note that we do have a Thursday night Denver Broncos game. So for folks that are here, I'm pretty sure everybody will be moving their vehicles by 4, but if we can make the map a little bit larger, there are some restricted spots here that we want to make sure folks are aware of, mainly along the sides of the parking lot. So if your vehicle is parked along the sides of one of the parking areas, we want to make sure that that those are moved before the tailgaters come in. So just wanted to do that quick administrative note before we get started.
So if you're parked in any of the red mark spots, please go move your vehicle.
You know, that does bring up a question. What time do the tailgaters start?
We do see them coming in throughout the morning and afternoon before we leave. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Approval of the September meeting minutes that were presented. Is there a motion to approve?
Move approval, Holly Williams.
Been moved by Holly, second by Vince. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? See none. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Transportation report. The last 2 months have been fairly light on agenda items for commission. In September, had budget workshop as they usually do, had roll forwards and amendments, and we're looking at the redistribution funding, anticipation of that. Had a presentation on the fuels impact fee and the bridge and tunnel enterprise fee to the commission. Wasn't a whole lot of noteworthy items on those. I would encourage you to look at those minutes with the data on the actual numbers of amounts collected through those fees and things. I didn't write all those down, so I'm not going to try to relay them. When you can look at the minutes from those meetings. And then for their October meeting, they did a road trip, took the train from Union Station. Well, actually took the train from here to Union Station, then the train over to Glenwood on Amtrak, and had their meeting over there. Did a tour of the RAFTA facilities over there for their transit system, and it's good to see a system that's well ran and ramps up and down for big events and things in the area, and the very modern facilities that they have and system that they're using, and bringing in the alternative vehicle buses and all those different things. That was a very good tour. One of the main items that was discussed in their meeting on Thursday was in the budget workshop, and it's the redistribution. They're recommending putting around 80 million into rural pavement, and then the remainder of the redistribution funding from the feds into other projects, which we'll be hearing about later in our meeting today. So I won't go into more. That kind of covers commission. They've been kind of lighter on their agenda items. So any questions for me? Okay. Seeing none, TPR, trying to decide best way to do this. I think we'll go through the roll call. Central Front Range.
Hey, good morning. Dwayne McFall again here from Central Front Range. We had our meeting in October, had normal business. We did some action items with some RPP funds, moving a few things around for 27-29, FY 27-29. We did approve our 2050 regional transportation plan and had a resolution for that approval, and then other regular business, and that was about it. Thank you.
Grand Valley.
All right, so we have two new staff, or new positions filled. So we recently hired a new transportation planner, Timber Erickson, and then we promoted our mobility manager to our safety program manager with the funding from the Highway Safety Office. So excited to be training and ramping up those positions and doing a lot more safety programming out of our office. We also had the Western Colorado APA conference in Grand Junction a couple weeks ago, and we were able to present on the work that we were doing in our office through a couple of sessions. And then we have also been working on starting a transportation finance study. So we are at the consultant selection part of that. So we're hoping to kick that off pretty soon in the next couple weeks. And then lastly, something fun we did and we've done it for many, many years, but there's a trunk or treat event in Fruta. And so we take out one of our transit buses and open it up, and we had about 1,000 kids walk through our bus. So a great way to just get people on the bus, and a lot of kids didn't want to get off. So we made a little seating area, which I think was cool. Like, you guys can just hang out here and get used to sitting on a bus, but a great and very low cost way of getting a lot of people just stepping on a bus for the first time in our area. So that's it. Thank you.
Greater Denver.
Yeah, thank you. So at our October 15th board meeting, the DRCOG board adopted amendments to our 2026 through 2029 transportation improvement program. We adopted project funding selections for our transportation demand management tip set aside. We heard presentations on planning for Front Range Passenger Rail, as well as joint service planning from the Front Range Passenger Rail District and OEDIT, the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. We heard a presentation from the Regional Transportation District on its draft report addressing the status of completing its Fast Tracks Rail Build-Out Program. And we received an update from our staff, DRCOG's Multimodal Supportive Local Development Toolkit. Thank you.
Thank you. Gunnison Valley, Vince.
There's not much happening at Gunnison Valley, other than finishing up a lot of the projects that they've already started and look to be completing, because the weather is so nice out there and there's no snow, okay, unless it's really up high. Ski area is supposed to open in about 2.5 weeks, so hopefully they're making snow. One of the major things that's happening with our TPR is I am retiring after the end of December. And so next week is our TPR meeting, and we're hope to be selecting, or at least getting some prospects for somebody to replace me. And this is after 32 years. I began originally with the beginning of STAC, and so hung in there. Was chairman of STAC for about 20 years. And so I had to step down from that because of the legislation. And so anyway, I think that's all I got.
Thank you for your years of service. Appreciate all you've done. And at break, we do have a cake to commemorate your 30-some years of service. So we'll be bringing a cake out for you. Just so. Everybody can grab that on our break. Thank you. Okay, Intermountain.
Yes, we approved 2 different plans. One is the final 2050 plan, and the other plan is the public transit and human services transportation plan. So that's what we handled. We did it. We canceled our meeting because we could handle these online through an email vote. So that's how we conducted these final approvals. That's all I had.
Okay. North Front Range.
Got a couple of bullet points here. At our October meeting, we went through the MMOF allocation so that we aren't over-programmed. So went through the reconciliation process for that. We are continuing to partner with CDOT on US 34 corridor for the US 34 transit plan. And CDOT's reached out and met with stakeholders for a series of workshops as we continue to move forward with that. And Tuesday after the election, we have some new council members coming in, so that'll change at our meeting this evening. We'll discuss some more of that. And we have a freight survey out right now to inform the 2026 Freight Northern Colorado Plan, and the link is on our MPO page. So if you know someone who would be interested in taking that, please pass that information along. And finally, we've released an RFP to update the regional travel demand model as the first step to our 2055 RTP update. That's everything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Northwest.
All right, we had our Northwest CPR meeting on October 16th. This was the first meeting with an election for a 2-year term. So last year we voted to change our bylaws to say that the chair and vice chair will go to a 2-year term. So I am here for another 2 years at least, and Jennifer O'Hearn, who's online, is our vice chair. We also approved MMOF funding for City of Craig. They have a rail plan redevelopment area. And so we awarded them $150,000 to help with that plan. This goes along with Hayden, who also did a similar plan. And then Routt County has an MMF project as well. Leaves us with just under $115,000 to dole out if we want to dole it out based on if a good project comes up. Other than that, Winter Park Ski Resort opened on Halloween. We're all excited for the snow. Thanks.
Okay, Pikes Peak.
Okay. Not much to report. We did do a tip amendment. We had our federal certification review with FHWA and FTA, and thank you for the valuable feedback. We have 2 projects that I've driven through recently. I-25 between Fillmore and Garden of the Gods, looking great. The work is going fantastic. It looks like to me it might be substantially complete within 6 months, meaning that we can all start driving a little bit again. And then we have a great project. It may have been congressionally directed funding on Powers Boulevard, which is State Highway 21. And it's a bridge from over Powers Boulevard to get the military over to Peterson Air Force Base. And that's going to be really, really convenient for our military. And then I think we may have moved a project around to try and get a little bit more funding up around Highway 24 and Garrett Road, which seems to be a high accident prone area out in Falcon where we have a lot of growth. Other than that, we did have one disappointing report, and I wanted to mention this. Our coroner came in for their annual report on deaths. And this year there were more deaths due to motorcycle and car accidents, which were about equal, and then there were to fentanyl. So that was really kind of worrisome to us. I know that some of the motorcyclists may not yet understand lane filtering. I know as a driver, I don't understand it yet, but we have an awful lot of aggressive driving going on and we just don't know how to tackle the problem. So if anyone comes up with a great idea, let us know.
Pueblo.
So the I-25 and US 50B interchange is really making some great progress. If you're going to Pueblo this weekend, avoid I-25 at that area because they're going to be closing it. They're going to be doing the demolition of the old bridges over I-25, but it's really looking great. The NPO is in our process of updating our 2050 long range plan, and we'll be getting a draft out in December with an adoption in April. So we're making great progress there. Our Medal of Honor Boulevard, which is a new road that connects Pueblo West to Pueblo, that's going to be opening hopefully in December. We're also hoping to update our bicycle and pedestrian master plan and working on our RFP right now. And we're going to be seeing 3 new counselors to our board along with a few other board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva, for the presentation. When you're ready for the conversation with the Transportation Commission on the GHG report as part of the planning standard, please reach out and we'll happy to accommodate that and get you on the schedule later in the spring.
Okay, San Luis Valley.
Yeah, good morning. We haven't had a TPR meeting since our last STAC meeting. We meet next week, Thursday. Not a lot to report besides summer projects kind of wrapping up. I know CDOT crews did a good job with the abundance of rain we got last month, so we appreciate that. That's all I have to report.
South Central.
Good morning. So we had a MMOF call for projects. The scoring committee recommended that The TPR approved the Walsenburg Transit Facility, additional funding for that. At our TPR meeting on October 23rd, we passed a resolution to adopt the 2050 plan and the 2050 public transportation plan. There's a couple big resurfacing projects south of Trinidad on I-25. There's 7.5 miles being resurfaced there. That project is moving forward, and north of Trinidad, there's 12.6 miles being resurfaced. So that's all I have to report.
Thank you. Southeast.
Yes, thank you. We had our October 22nd meeting. We had the adoption of the resolution for the 2050 plan, and then we had a call. We reopened our call for the MMOF, and we're working through those projects here real soon. And that's all I have.
Anybody from Southern Ute? Seen anybody? Southwest.
Good morning. At our October meeting, we adopted our 2050 Southwest Regional Transportation Plan. We are working on our 10-year plan update, and just construction and maintenance projects are moving along, getting ready for winter. That's all we have.
Thank you. Upper Front Range.
Good morning. So at our September 4th meeting, we had the adoption of our 2050 Regional Transportation Plan for Upper Front Range. We also went through MMOF reconciliation, reducing funding on a couple projects, but really had a good process through that. Let's see, we awarded FY25 CMAQ funding in that September meeting. And then for our December 4th meeting, we're looking at the adoption of the Upper Front Range 2050 Human Services and Transit Plan. So that's what we're looking at, and that's what we've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Ute Mountain. Don't believe we had anybody on. Okay. For Eastern, we haven't had any meetings, just the routine closing out of construction projects, bridge replacements, and different projects going on, closing out for the season. And fall harvest is wrapping up in Eastern Colorado. All right, federal partners, John.
Not a whole lot from Federal Highway. We're appreciative to be able to still be working despite the government shutdown, but our activities have been really dialed back. And so we're hopeful that at some point here soon that we'll have a resolution. We'll be back to a little bit more normal rhythm and normal activities. So I guess that's it for Federal Highway.
Okay. Any updates from Federal Transit?
None for me. Thank you, though.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think that concludes our updates from TPRs. Legislative report. Emily.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you in person. Emily Hadaway, Legislative Liaison. We're about 70 days out from the legislative session beginning in 2026. It's going to begin a little bit later this year on January 14th. Kind of the big news of the past week is the governor's budget proposal was released on November 1st. If you take a look, you'll notice that there were no cuts to CDOT, so that's great news. I think kind of the general consensus in the administration is that we contributed our fair share last year to budget balancing. So even though there is a big budget deficit that we're up against again this year on the statewide level, hopefully CDOT won't come into play. But just because we're in the governor's proposal as having no cuts, that doesn't mean that the JBC will think the same way. So we'll definitely have to continue to play defense on our budget and could absolutely use all of your support in that effort. I think in general, we'll have to remind the JBC that of the cuts that they adopted last year and that they did apply for 2 years. So even though we're going into a new fiscal year, that budget that reduction from the general fund transfer will still apply this upcoming year, as well as the reduction to the road safety surcharge. So we still will have impacts in this fiscal year that and FY27 that we've already contributed to balancing the budget. I think that it'll be kind of a low hanging fruit if as far as MMOF goes. So I think we'll have to play defense on that. And that's a place where we could definitely use your help tapping in to share why MMOF is beneficial to your communities, what an additional cut would do to your planned projects. Because I know just even listening to you now, how much work you put into administering these funds, and having to adjust again would be quite a lift. So, that's one of our only sources of general fund that goes to the department is that MMOF annual transfer of 10 million. So, if you do have JBC members in your MPOs and TPRs, or even if you don't, reaching out to share why you would like that money to stay in place is definitely key. We also do have an MMOF decision item that we're presenting to the JBC. That goes back to the fact that MMOF is still annually appropriated, which it continues to be a hard thing to administer for us because the projects do not occur on an annual basis. So we're coming up against another funding lapse this year where we'll lose access to, I believe it's 51.4 million in cash fund spending authority. So we need JBC's approval to access that funding to award it. So that's another thing that we'll need your support on, encouraging the JBC members to continue to award us that spending authority so we don't lose access to that funding. I think kind of one of the sentiments we heard last year from JBC members was, well, it's okay to cut MMOF because these aren't big projects, they're only small projects, and I don't think that's the right sentiment. And so even, a small project can have quite a benefit for a lot of communities. And so I think reaching out would be very helpful on that. We'll also have to play defense to ensure that those the reductions to the road safety surcharge do not continue on to the future. So that was a 2-year temporary reduction to the road safety surcharge. That's our road safety surcharge, which is a registration fee that will continue into FY27. And then I have to actually look at the actual date when it's up. But we want to make sure that the JBC does not make that a permanent cut, because that would be detrimental as well. Let's see. Other big update of the summer is TLRC had their final meeting, I believe, last month. So they had the opportunity to draft 5 bills this year and advance 3 of those bills. They only ended up advancing 2, and it was kind of a voting error that the votes were split amongst some of the other bills and just didn't end up reaching that threshold. So unfortunately, CDOT's cleanup bill that we were pursuing did not move forward out of TLRC, and we're still pursuing it next year. But that wasn't due to any concerns with the bill. It's mostly because the bill is kind of boring. And so it maybe wasn't as interesting to some of the legislators. But the 2 bills that did move forward was one related to e-titling solutions at the DMV, another bill related to diesel truck scrappage program in CDPHE's Clean Fleet Enterprise. And so now I'm working to kind of adjust my strategy around that transportation cleanup bill. That bill, just as a reminder, is a kind of omnibus bill of various just cleanups that we need across the divisions. So adding Broomfield to Transportation Commission District 4 because it's not listed. Some cleanups to the chain station or the chain assist program that we ran last year, which puts revenue from fee permits into the HUTF instead of the state highway fund, which is only, probably a couple $1,000s. And so just kind of those kind of quick changes. So we're strategizing on that. And then we won't have a lot of other big items next year, but we are still kind of figuring out what busting funding will look like. We're coming to the end of a one-time appropriation of general fund to expand busting our pilot across I-70 and I-25. And so that funding will come to an end soon, and we need to figure out what a permanent solution will be to continue those expanded pilot levels. So we're also still exploring that, and if it should be a legislative solution, an administrative solution, or what that looks like. So we'll keep you in the loop as that develops further as well. that's big updates on my end.
I have a question for Emily. So we have two multimodal option funds, correct? Is one an enterprise and what about the other one? And we're wanting to know if the other one is depleted.
Yes, so there's two funding sources that go into the MMOF, but it's not an enterprise itself. So there is the retail delivery fee, and that is not likely to get swept because fees have very particular uses of how they can be directed per legislation. So you couldn't sweep the retail delivery fee revenue and put it towards, Medicaid or something like that because fees have to have a nexus to the fee payer. The other source that goes into MMOF is the general fund transfer. So that's the annual general fund transfer of $10 million a year. And that's what I think could be, potentially a low-hanging fruit for the JBC members since CDOT doesn't have much general fund to cut. All we get is that annual MMOF general fund transfer and our annual it's usually $100 million appropriation towards 10-year plan projects. It's already been reduced down to 50 million in FY27. So those are the two kind of spots that if the JBC is trying to find more general fund, they might look to those two places. And then retail delivery fee and general fund go to MMOF. 15% goes to CDOT, which we utilize for busting, and then the rest goes to locals and is split up through the formula that you all know well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Emily? Elizabeth?
Emily, on that draft transit equity bill that's floating around out there, what's CDOT's position on that one?
Yes, so there is a bill that Rep. Joseph is working on. It's titled, I've seen different titles. I've seen transit equity, transit access. That bill has 3 different sections. So the first section mandates all transit agencies in the state to start a partner pass program for low-income individuals. The second part tasks all transit agencies in the state to start a pass, basically coordinate with shelters in their operating counties to give free transit rides to individuals experiencing homelessness. And then the final part concerns bathroom access on long haul trips, and then also language access, being posted at bus stations and in buses themselves. And so CDOT has not taken a formal position. We just in general, the governor's stance for the agencies is that we don't take official positions on bills until they're introduced. But we have been talking to the sponsors and do see that, if busting was implicated by that bill, it would have a fiscal note for sure for us to coordinate with all of the shelters and all of the counties that we operate in, as well as fare box revenue loss in terms of offering discounted or free transit passes to low-income individuals, and then also just starting those programs, administering them. And there is also a portion of the bill that says that transit agencies must ensure, I think it's 60% participation in the program of eligible transit riders, which would mean a lot of outreach, a lot of advertising to ensure that people are actually utilizing the program. So we've shared that with the sponsors and also shared that it's not great timing with busting already facing a funding deficit. I think it's likely they might remove busting from the bill just because next year, any bill that has a significant fiscal note that's not already in the budget probably won't move forward because there's not really much flexibility. But maybe that helps CDOT, but I know that still puts other transit agencies, like we've heard from CASTA, that this would be a huge lift for small transit agencies for RTD. I don't know if RTD is taking a position, but for other transit agencies. And so we'll keep monitoring and see how we can partner and support smaller transit agencies as well.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah. Seeing none. Any federal legislation update?
Actually,
There she is.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to wish you a happy Nacho Day as well as a happy Men Make Dinner Day. So I don't know if those are connected, but like seems like a good pairing. So federal update, as John said, there's not a lot going on. We're in day 37 of the longest government shutdown in history. So right now it sounds like the logjam there's some hope. There was no hope for a while, but now there's some hope that the logjam might be moving a little bit. Democrats are feeling like the election on Tuesday was a referendum for them. I'm not 100% sure how Republicans feel about that, but hopefully we're getting somewhere. Obviously, if you were traveling over Thanksgiving, you probably are very aware of the Secretary's announcement last night that they're going to be reducing air traffic at airports over the holidays. I'm sure that's another effort to kind of put the feet to the fire. So we'll see if that has any impact. But in terms of FHWA, FTA, and FRA, still chugging along. On this day in history, so this is kind of fun. It's often an election day, obviously, because it's early in November. So on this day in history, Abraham Lincoln was elected, Ronald Reagan was elected, and the Gore-Bush election ended in kind of the statistical tie that we all remember from 2000, and it ended up going to the Supreme Court. So just interesting day in history, a very Republican day, I guess we could say. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on not much going on. This is my last STAC meeting for a couple of months. Expecting the kiddo in the next week or so. Herman will be taking over, and I don't know that you'll be able to get fun facts out of him, but I'm sure if John Leosatos asks
Not
really
a chance.
nicely, I will be back in February or March. So hope everybody's doing well and has a good winter.
Thank you. All righty. Any other legislative updates from anybody that's heard something around this? Sometimes we hear other things that they may not know. All right. We'll go ahead and take our break. In honor of Vince, we'll get the cake out here and everybody can grab a piece of cake and wish Vince well on his retirement from transportation plan. Okay. We'll call the meeting back to order. If everybody could take their seats. We'll move on with our 2026-27 proposed budget overview from Jeff.
All right. Can we pull up the slide deck? Oh, Michael, here, there you are, right? All right. Good morning. Jeff Sidmeyer, Chief Financial Officer. This morning, two items we're going to cover. The first is the first draft of the fiscal year 27 budget. So that's the budget that we're developing now for the fiscal year that will begin next July 1. And the second item we're going to cover is an amendment to the current fiscal year budget. So I'll cover the 27 budget first. We are just at the beginning of the budget development cycle. So I'll present to you the draft budget for fiscal year 27 this month. We'll be bringing that draft budget to the Transportation Commission in about 2 weeks to request their approval, but it is their approval of a draft budget only. We have to submit that budget by December 15th. There's a statutory deadline to submit it to the governor's office. But then we will continue to work on the budget and update the budget, work through the budget process over the next few months. We don't formally adopt the budget until March. So here today to review the first draft, but we will be back again probably in the February-March timeline to review again before we finalize the budget. So Michael, any luck with the slides? Still working? No problem. So we'll give Michael just a second to catch up here on the slides and then we'll jump in. All right, and you can jump ahead a few slides too. I think let's go to the next slide. And actually this is fine. Well, I'm going to flip the order just to follow the slide deck. So I'm actually going to do the budget amendment first, and then we'll go to the fiscal year 27 budget. So shifting my notes here a little bit. All right, so in September, we completed our revenue reconciliation process. That's the process by which we reconcile the prior fiscal year's revenues. That includes any, if you've heard the term federal redistribution, any federal redistribution, that's additional federal funds we receive as the feds close out their fiscal year. So we go through that revenue reconciliation process in September of each year. We've got what we call flexible funds and inflexible funds. Inflexible are those that are dedicated statutorily to a very narrow purpose. We don't really have a decision point. We just adjust the revenue that we budgeted for that particular program. That'd be an example. That would be like CMAQ. For flexible programs, those are the federal programs that we have discretion over how we utilize. We reconcile those revenues, positive or negative, from the prior fiscal year to what we call the Commission Program Reserve, which is one of the Transportation Commission's two primary reserve funds. So we ended that revenue reconciliation cycle with a program reserve balance of about 147 million. The largest part of that balance, the increase to that balance, was federal redistribution. We received of around 99 million. The TC approved a few amendments last month. Going into the current month, we have an ending program reserve balance of about 145 million. I'll note that we typically try to maintain a balance in this fund of about 40 to 50 million after this revenue reconciliation process is concluded. And that is just sort of based on historical needs that arise over the course of the year. We try to preserve that to sort of have to use over the course of the next year. What that does mean is about this time in the fall, if we have a significant surplus above that sort of target range, we develop recommendations to the commission about how to allocate those funds. So last month, we presented a proposal to the TC, and let's go to the next slide, Michael, to allocate some additional funds to two primary areas. We're proposing allocations to pavement, to MLOS, additional funds to MLOS, and then we have a small item, a small request from Region 4. So I'll go through each of these in more detail in the next slides, and then we'll be bringing this request to the commission for consideration of approval at their meeting in about 2 weeks. Let's go to the next slide. So we've, over the last several years, I think we've had this group has had a lot of discussions about pavement condition, concerns about pavement condition statewide. Over the last several years, we've made targeted investments to help us catch up on pavement condition, recognizing the state of our pavement, including our interstates, where a couple of years ago, we were approaching a critical threshold of 5% poor, where if we exceed that 5% poor threshold, we face some restrictions on the use of our federal funds. So over the last few years, we've really been trying to find opportunities to increase funding for pavement. We've done that through two primary ways. One has been through allocating funds to primarily rural pavement projects in the 10-year plan. The other has been supplemental allocations that we've made to pavement, typically through this amendment cycle process. And so based on the amount of funds available this year, we are recommending that we allocate about 80 million of that program reserve balance to projects that really are focused on addressing some of our worst pavement statewide. So each region has, over the last 4 to 6 weeks, has been working on identifying potential projects that address some of the worst of that pavement statewide. I might say, Darius, is this a good point? Do we have that handy? Do you want to pull that up? We don't have this in the presentation, but we are finalizing what that list of projects look like. So we can share with you, I think today, the specific projects that at this point we're proposing to fund with this 80 million in additional pavement funding.
Yeah, I can help share that with her. And we do have a couple of our regional staff here to answer more questions. As noted that this is going to the TC, so we're working on the finalization of this. But to note if this gets approved by the TC, some of the items that are being considered are Colorado 46A, Golden Gate Canyon Road, Colorado 12 in the southern part of the state from Coal Creek to V Hill, Colorado 125 north of Walden, Colorado 94 region line to US Highway 28740, Colorado 114, Colorado Trail to US 285, Colorado 8 Morrison Road in Lakewood, Colorado 139 south of Rangeley, Colorado 22 in Brighton, Colorado 79 in Bennett, improving ramps on I-25 in the Denver metro area. And then finally, doing resurfacing on I-70 Grand Junction with a $8 million request to the Fields Impact Enterprise.
Okay, thank you, Darius. And I'm sure we can probably send that out. We don't have that in the presentation because these projects really we were working to identify just over the last few weeks, and those will be shared with the commission this month. But one other point I want to make on the pavement recommendation here. One of the other reasons that we're recommending a large allocation to pavement beyond the obvious need is the fact that when we receive a large amount of federal redistribution like we did this year, there's really sort of two things we need to keep in mind. One, we want to try to recycle those dollars into federally eligible activities. So we don't want to allocate them to things like maintenance. As much as we love maintenance, maintenance isn't federally eligible. And so in order to kind of keep the pipeline of federal funds moving, we really need to put those redistribution dollars back towards federally eligible projects. So that's one consideration is we want to identify projects that are federal aid eligible. The other consideration is we want to identify projects that are typically quick to move. Similar reason, we need to deploy our federal funds as quickly as we can. It helps us compete for more redistribution the next year. So that leads us to look at things that we can move quickly on. Pavement, generally speaking, are projects that are very quick to move. I think some of these projects are going to be, we're hoping will be moving to construction next summer. So that is the first part of our request, is the 80 million for pavement. Let's go on to the next slide. We also have an additional request that would utilize the state funds that are part of that program reserve balance. Only about 16 million of that overall balance is state funds. And we are recommending that essentially the close to the full amount of that state balance be allocated to MLOS. The reason for that is the last couple of years, we've been really tight on flexible state funds and being able to allocate the full amount that we think we need to our MLOS program. And so in this current fiscal year, we are forecasting that our current MLOS budget is probably going to be short somewhere between 16 to 18 million. And so we have an opportunity with the additional funds we have available here to allocate additional funds to MLOS to hopefully ensure that we've got full funding for the course of the fiscal year. I won't get into a lot of detail here, but the primary place where we have a funding shortfall is related to our what we call special pay items, so the overtime, housing, et cetera. These are things that that historically we've actually paid for out of vacancy savings, but we've done such a good job of reducing our vacancies and maintenance that we now have the problem that it means we have increased MLOS costs that are difficult to keep up with. So this $16 million allocation from to MLOS will help us get closer to what we think is needed to fully fund the maintenance program for the fiscal year. Maybe not to the level of performance everywhere we would like, but to the level that we think will allow us to kind of maintain our current levels of service. All right, one additional smaller request that is part of the budget amendment this month. This is sort of a technical item. We have, you can move on to the next slide, Michael. We have a $1.1 million request from Region 4. We have a process, what's called a roll forward process, where if you've got funds in operating funds at the end of the fiscal year that you haven't spent, you can go through that roll forward process to request to keep those funds. Otherwise, we sweep them back to that program reserve. For reasons I don't need to get into here, we had one item from Region 4 that was missed through that process. It was about $1 million that was actually tied to a striping contract. So they want that $1 million back, because if we don't give it to them, it's going to have to eat into their budget this year, which is going to probably result in them having to cancel other work this year. So that is the third and final request, is to essentially restore that 1.1 million in funding to Region 4. All right, next slide, please. All right, so I think I'll wrap up this part of the budget amendment presentation. So again, these three amendments will be going to the commission in about 2 weeks. The 80 million for pavement, the approximately 16 million for MLOS, and the 1 million for Region 4. And then that will bring that program reserve balance down to sort of our target range. If the commission approves all three of those items, we'll be at about a $47 million balance, which is right about where we like to be at this point in the year. So that is our fiscal year 26 budget amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any on that. If not, we'll move on to the second presentation, which is the fiscal year 27 budget.
So I just have a question. What's the process that you went? I mean, I think it all sounds great. What is the process that you go through to pick those roadways? You know, are they already prioritized? Are you working with regions to decide like, these are our priorities at this moment, or?
For the pavement project specifically?
Yeah, for the project, yeah.
Yeah, and I can speak to this briefly, and then I think probably Darius or maybe Heather as an RTD would like to jump in. But really, I think in this case, we were looking at projects that fell outside of that weren't already planned as part of our surface treatment or 10-year plan. And we were looking at projects also that targeted really the worst pavement conditions. So we were looking at things that had a drivability life of 0 or maybe 1. But Darius, do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
No, I think that about covers it, is looking at those other areas where we can stretch those dollars and take care of low drivability life, following the distribution of how we distribute our service treatment program on an annual basis. And then those were identified as through that process to be brought forward. And then Heather, if you're here, if you want to add it, if we got everything right, or if there's anything else you want to add.
No, I think there's a number of projects that we all have in our regions that are, they want to get on the list, but the lists are fiscally constrained. And so we really targeted low drivability roads. Most every project on this list has 0 life left. And so we have a handful of projects that have 0 life left. So it was fairly easy to develop a list of projects in each of the regions. We used the formula, and then we really just prioritized based on our payment managers' sort of recommendations of where the greatest need was.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions or comments on that, I'll move on to the proposed fiscal year 27 budget. So let's move on to the first slide here. Or actually, let's go one more slide. So I'll start off today's presentation with a review of our current revenue forecast. So we forecast revenues quarterly. The first draft of this fiscal year 27 budget is based on our quarter 1 forecast. So this is a multi-year forecast, but we update that forecast every quarter. Generally, our forecast simply reflects anticipated federal revenues based on the most recent transportation authorization bill. We're currently in the last year of our current transportation authorization bill, the IIJA. We are, for the purposes of building our fiscal year 27 budget, we're currently assuming that those IIJA funding levels continue into fiscal year 27. But the reality is that remains a significant unknown. And since right now we don't have a spending bill in general, obviously, for many functions of government for the current fiscal year, I'm certainly not going to speculate on timing or outlook for the next transportation authorization. But for planning purposes, we continue to forecast that the current levels of federal funding will continue with our next transportation authorization bill. For state revenues, we utilize a robust revenue model, and we develop our own forecast. We compare that forecast to forecast by the state, the Legislative Council, and the Office of State Planning and Budget. HUTF, which is our largest source of state funding, is expected to remain fairly flat going into fiscal year 27. While we still have some Senate Bill 260 fees phasing in, sort of stepping up over time, any growth from fee increases is largely offset by declining growth in fuel consumption, lower economic growth expectations, and a temporary reduction that's been put in place to the faster road safety surcharge for fiscal year 26 and 27. So you kind of take those factors together, and while we've got fees that are still phasing in, the net result is that HUTF revenues are still pretty flat. We are forecasting total HUTF revenue to CDOT in fiscal year 27 of roughly $669 million as compared to about $657 million in the current fiscal year. Next slide, please. So our forecast is right in line with forecasts from our partners in the Office of State Planning and Budget and Legislative Council. I'll note that both of those forecasts are indicating that state revenues will again surpass the Tabor cap in fiscal year 27, meaning taxpayer refunds. While everybody loves to get a refund, right? I will say that from a state budget perspective, fiscal year 27 will be another difficult year for the state budget. Our fiscal year 27 budget, our draft budget we're reviewing today, already reflects some reductions to revenue that were approved in the last legislative session. So last session, we took some reductions both to the current fiscal year, but also some reductions sort of preemptively were made in fiscal year 27. And so we've already built in some of those reductions at this point. That includes the previously mentioned temporary reduction to the faster road safety surcharge, but also a reduction to our planned $100 million general fund transfer that was put in place under Senate Bill 260. So Senate Bill 260 put in place an annual transfer of $100 million that began in fiscal year 25. We are seeing that cut in the current fiscal year and in fiscal year 27 as part of broader efforts to balance the state budget. So in fiscal year 27, we'll get about half of that general fund transfer of $50 million. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so backing up, taking a big picture view of revenues in fiscal year 27, factoring in those previously referenced reductions, we are forecasting a total revenues to CDOT and affiliated enterprises of about $2.25 billion. About 36% of those revenues come from federal apportionments, primarily through FHWA and FTA. About 30% come through those HUTF, the Highway User Tax Fund, HUTF. About 9% flow through the Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise. About 10% the CTIO, Colorado Transportation Investment Office. About 2% is that general fund transfer I referenced. And 13% is a variety of other state funding sources. That includes revenues flowing to the other CDOT enterprises, aeronautics, fuel tax revenue, and a couple of other smaller sources. I will note that in total, enterprises represent about 26% of revenues. With CDOT making up about 74% of revenue. So enterprises have definitely grown in significance in terms of revenues in total to CDOT and the enterprises. All right, let's go to the next slide. So looking at how we allocate that 2.25 billion in revenues in the fiscal year 27 budget, those revenues are allocated, about 38% of those revenues are allocated to capital construction programs, including asset management and safety programs, the RPP program and the 10-year plan. About 22% is allocated to maintenance and operations, including our MLOS program and traffic operations programs. About 14% goes to sub-allocated programs. So those are our grant programs such as RMS or MMOF or transit grant programs, as well as the dollars that are sub-allocated to the MPOs. About 11% go to multimodal programs. That includes our transit service Mustang, as well as 10-year plan transit projects. It also includes our innovative mobility programs and electrification programs. About 7% goes to overall administration and operations of the department. So a lot of this is salaries and benefits of our staff. And then about 9% go to a variety of other programs, the most significant being our debt service and our contingency or reserve fund. Let's go to the next slide, please. So the draft fiscal year 27 budget is posted on the CDOT website. There is a link in your packet if you want to review the entire document, which is about a 100-page document. It includes two primary components. It includes the revenue allocation plan and a spending plan. The revenue allocation plan is the portion of the budget that the commission is most familiar with, and the STAC. That is basically the portion of our budget that looks at current year revenues and says, how are we going to allocate those revenues? The spending plan, on the other hand, provides a comprehensive view of our overall spending. What do we think we're going to spend in fiscal year 27 in this case, both from those current fiscal year revenues, but as well as from our existing fund balances. Let's go to the next slide. So as I mentioned previously, we are using our current revenue forecast. Our draft budget is balanced against that current revenue forecast. I mentioned earlier the terms flexible revenue and inflexible revenue. One thing to sort of back up and explain a little bit in terms of how the budget comes together. Much of our revenue is inflexible in the sense that it is very narrowly prescribed legislatively, either at the federal level or the state level. That includes things like the MMOF program, aeronautics, enterprise revenues. At the federal level, that includes programs like CMAQ or HSIP. So for many of those program sources, we don't really have a decision point in building the budget. We are simply forecasting the revenue source and we're saying, here's our budget for the HSIP program this year, or here's our budget for the MMOF program. So in a lot of respects, much of our budget is set just simply by those legislative guardrails on funding. Flexible revenues are the revenues that are obviously flexible. They generally have a wider range of eligible uses, and the commission has more discretion about how to allocate those funds. So for most of the programs, so when we're building our budget, in flexible revenues, again, largely it's just a matter of forecasting the revenues for those particular programs. For the flexible portion of our budget, we generally start with building the budget with prior year levels with some adjustments to balance. And for our capital construction program, for our asset management programs, we actually, through the Division of Transportation Development, we set planning levels for those programs a few years in advance. And so when we get to the actual budget year, if the revenue is there, we simply reflect those planned levels. So a lot of the budget sort of comes together as a result of sort of that pre-existing guidance. Let's go to the next slide here. So this next slide just sort of illustrates a bit further how the budget comes together. So again, programs with dedicated revenue sources or inflexible revenues are allocated based on forecasted amounts. Programs with pre-established funding levels, so that's sort of a previously agreed upon funding level of, like, for example, 50 million for RPP. We simply reflect those previously established amounts and until or unless we have a recommendation or bring a recommendation forward to change those. Much of our budget is developed based on internal budget processes. So that's planning operating budgets, for example, of our individual divisions. We then also have portions of our budget that are sort of established on a set schedule, like our debt service. And then we have asset management, which I mentioned previously. The Division of Transportation Development essentially develops planning levels several years in advance that we incorporate into the budget. So much of the work of developing our draft budget is somewhat done for us before we even bring it to the commission for review. Let's go to the next slide here. So I'm just going to cover a few highlights of the fiscal year 27 budget before we wrap up here. I'll start first with asset management. I'm not going to go into the details of this slide. There's a lot going on this slide, sort of showing how we backfilled some reductions, but I'll just kind of summarize. In fiscal year 27, our asset management programs remain essentially flat at the same levels as fiscal year 26. Those programs total approximately $370 million, not including bridge and tunnel enterprise and the maintenance levels of service programs. If you add those two in, that's another $113 million for bridge and tunnel enterprise and another $313 for maintenance levels of service. So again, asset management levels for fiscal year 27, basically same level as the current fiscal year, $370 million plus MLOS and bridge and tunnel enterprise. We did have to do, and this is the slide that sort of shows you the back and forth here. We did have to reallocate some funds to maintain that level of funding because we had this temporary faster road safety surcharge reduction. We had to reallocate some funds from bridge and tunnel enterprise and some funds from the 10-year plan to our asset management program to backfill that reduction and make sure that we didn't see our asset management program reduced in fiscal year 27. Let's go to the next slide. The other item I wanted to highlight is the 10-year plan. The draft fiscal year 27 budget allocates about $145 million to the 10-year plan. We're right at the point in our planning cycle where you're going to hear about the update to the 10-year plan in a little bit. So we're planning for that next several years of revenues. We have a target for planning purposes about $225 million annually. In fiscal year 27, we're obviously short of that, about $145 million. We're lower this year for a couple of reasons, but most notably it's due to that reduction to our general fund transfer. So we saw our general fund transfer essentially cut in half, which took about $50 million out of that number. We do hope, however, that some of that revenue is made up in later years. Our general fund reduction in the bill that was run last session did increase the planned amounts of general fund transfers several years out. We'll see what happens when we get there, but at least on paper, that general fund reduction comes back to us in later years. But it does mean less available in the short term for the 10-year plan. Let's go on to the next slide. So again, I'm kind of wrapping up here. There is, as I mentioned, we are early in the budget cycle. There is still a lot to come. A couple of those things that are still coming. One is statewide common policies. Those are anything that is sort of set at the state level for us. Those are things like increases in salaries and benefits for state employees. Statewide common policies are what we're assessed for central services like IT and legal. We will see those numbers during the course of the year, and that will drive adjustments to a couple areas of our budget, in particular the maintenance program areas, agency operations, and administration. We have in the draft version built in about a 3.5% growth factor from the prior year to hopefully cover those adjustments. But that's one example of where we'll continue to make adjustments in the next few months as we finalize the budget. Next slide, please. Other items coming, decision items. So decision items is the process where I had mentioned earlier that a lot of our budget starts out at sort of prior fiscal year levels or pre-established funding levels. If we're going to make any changes more than $1 million to any of those previous levels, those are decision items that require commission approval. So in the February time period, we will bring the commission decision items that will result in potentially, depending on their approval, some upward or downward adjustments based on those decision items they choose to approve. And then again, we'll also see changes, as I mentioned previously, to our administration budget as we see some of those common policies get set. And then we'll see some changes probably to our maintenance reserve and contingency reserve fund as we have to balance. We generally do some balancing there. So if we have additional funds available, we may see those adjustments, those balances change. And then finally, but probably most significantly, we have an entire legislative session ahead of us. So we'll be monitoring that closely and also bring forward any changes that come out of the legislative session. That said, we do approve the final budget in March, which means we approve a budget before the state budget is set, which generally means that once we've adopted the budget, it's changed and we come back in July to catch things up. So, all right, I think one more slide. I think this is my final. Really just sort of recapping the timeline. So again, we'll have the commission request that the commission approve the draft budget in about 2 weeks. We'll submit that in December to the governor's office. And then once we get into the new calendar year, we'll be making, going through those additional processes to update the budget. We'll be looking at a new revenue forecast. We'll reviewing decision items. And then we'll have a final budget ready for approval in March. So, so I think that covers the 27 budget. I will stop there and happy to answer any questions you might have or make any comments.
Any questions for Jack? Comments? Nothing?
That exciting, huh?
All right. So I guess I'd entertain a motion to support recommendation to the commission to adopt, or I guess they adopt.
You have to have two separate motions, one for the amendment and one for the.
I'll defer to the chair as to how you want to proceed. If you want to do it, I certainly would welcome recommendations on both of those items if you're so inclined. But if you want to do that as one motion or two motions,
We can do
I think
one
either.
or.
Okay, we're
separate.
gonna move to recommend the draft amendments and the proposed budget to the Transportation Commission.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Carry that to the commission in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay. Up next is our I-270 project overview. David.
Good morning. Thank you, committee, for having me today. Is the material shared with you all? Because I can't see anything, the presentation.
The presentation is shared and we'll be bringing it up on the screen in just a second, David.
Perfect. All right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak a little bit about the I-270 corridor this morning. We have a lot of great things going on with this project, and I'm happy to share an update with the team. We can move on to the next slide. So the agenda for today is just to quickly go over some safety things. One of the things the I-270 project likes to do is talk about safety first on all of their meetings. So I'm going to do that as well in this meeting. We're going to discuss purpose and need that kind of guided the NEPA document and the draft environmental impact statement over the last 2 years that we've been working on it. Give an overview of the alternatives that we've looked at, and also go over the overall schedule, phasing of the project, and try to give as concise of an update as I can regarding the DEIS public review and hearings. Things are a little bit in flux right now with that bullet point, but I'll get to that when we get to that slide. And then I'd like to leave some time for questions. So. Yeah, one of the big safety issues that has recently happened on the corridor is on the evening of September 23rd. Is a pretty rainy evening. A large semi drove off the road going eastbound on I-270, struck the the type 3 guardrail in advance of the bridge, and then continued along the rail and broke through where it connected to the bridge rail and fell onto 56th Avenue. Thankfully, there was no life-threatening injuries. We now have temporary barrier that's protecting that gap in the rail. We're going to be going back pretty soon and adding a little bit more concrete barrier there to kind of enhance what the maintenance crews have already put there. But this kind of highlights the importance of this corridor. The infrastructure, especially this bridge, is outlived its useful life, along with some of the other bridges along the corridor. This bridge was built in the 1960s, and it just kind of highlights the importance to rebuild not only the entire highway, but this bridge up to the current standards that we have today, so that incidents like this can be prevented. Move on to the next slide. So the purpose and need that's guided this project since we started in EIS in early 2023 has been developed through a lot of outreach. I think the community really has bought into this purpose and need, and it has guided us to where we are today, where we have a DEIS that's ready to publish with a preliminary identified preferred alternative. The traveler safety, I think I talked a little bit about that at the beginning, but that also, not just with outdated infrastructure, that also includes things like shoulders that aren't wide enough for emergency response, congestion that creates a high amount of rear end accidents, interchanges that aren't to current standards that create side swiping incidents and other serious safety concerns. So that is definitely a purpose and a need statement that has been communicated to us frequently by users of the corridor, emergency responders, the freight community. And additionally, some of the underpasses along the corridor for bike and pedestrian are unsafe. So, further down this slide, we talk about bike and pedestrian connectivity across I-270, but we're not just talking about traveler vehicle safety. We're also talking about bikes and peds that try to get over and under the highway. Travel time and reliability. A lot of people know who have used this corridor that the I-270 corridor is frequently congested. It's one of the most congested highways in the state. So we want to be able to create a facility that can be reliable and people can use more the way it was intended. I think what's currently happening and what our traffic modeling is showing is that with the two general purpose lanes that currently exist on the highway, it's not serving the travel demand that's required in the area. And people are often detouring around through longer routes like I-25 and I-70 or through residential areas through the arterial roads that are around there. So we think that improving the congestion and reliability of the corridor will take that traffic that's taking longer and routes that are through neighborhoods and bring them back onto the corridor, which is what we need. Currently, the Flatiron Flyer 5, so moving on to transit on the corridor, the Flatiron Flyer 5 runs on the corridor. They have officially detoured around on the westbound route to I-25 and I-70. But Flatiron Flyer 5 going eastbound still uses I-270, but there is a standard detour for that route as well. So we want to get transit. Our preferred alternative accommodates transit on the corridor and will hopefully catalyze future transit and help the existing transit on the corridor. We talked a little bit about bicycle and pedestrian connectivity across I-270. With this corridor being built in the 1960s, all of the crossings, the bridge crossings, under the highway or over the highway are no longer compliant. They are not ADA accessible. And in some cases, they're not even there. So we want to bring those crossings back into compliance and accommodate Commerce City's Walk Bike Fit plan, which is a regional plan that they have, and also add some new connections. So at Vasquez Boulevard, adding underpasses that would connect central Commerce City to the Sand Creek Regional Greenway, and an overpass between Quebec and Vasquez that would connect to the Greenway on the south side, and then the Rose Hill neighborhood on the north. So those are just a few examples of some of the bicycle and pedestrian elements that are incorporated into this project. And then freight, 10, depending on where you are in the corridor, 10 to 17% of the corridor is traffic is freight. So we've worked a lot with the freight community, CMCA, Colorado Motor Carriers Association. One of the big things that they have asked for is their access from Vasquez is essential. Currently, it's a full clover leaf, and you have those really short merges with the weaving in and out of those lanes. We've reconfigured the Vasquez interchange with freight bypass lanes at the on-ramps, and then also a continuous auxiliary lane from Vasquez to I-76, which will allow the high volume of freight vehicles accessing from Vasquez to remain in that aux lane. And if they need to get onto I-270, they have a longer time frame to do it. But often, most of them are just getting right onto I-76 from Vasquez. So that would allow them just to stay in that continuous lane the entire length, which will greatly smooth out the traffic flow in the area and reduce some of those rear end crashes that we were talking about earlier. So meanwhile, we want to make sure that we're minimizing environmental and community impacts from the project. We've done a very thorough DEIS. We've also looked at some of the state required things through state reports. So Senate Bill 260 requirements, greenhouse gas emissions, particulate matter modeling, and more thorough community analysis through our state reports. So those will all be published here soon for the community to review. We can move on to the next slide. These are the alternatives that we've considered. The ones on the left are basically leaving the highway as is within the current configuration, with the minimal build being a full rebuild of the highway as is with 2 general purpose lanes and then widening the shoulders. But then the ones in the middle are adding an additional lane, and the ones on the right are adding 2 additional lanes. The 2 that got carried forward into the DEIS for detailed review was the 3 general purpose lanes, so adding 1 general purpose lane in each direction, and then the 2 general purpose lanes plus 1 express lane that accommodates transit, which is the an additional lane in each direction as well. We also, as required by all NEPA, have compared those 2 alternatives that are circled to the no action. So the DEIS is going to be published here any day now. We're trying to work through some things related to what's going on with the government shutdown to get exact dates, and I'll go through that a little bit later. And the preliminary identified preferred alternative will be published in that DEIS that's coming soon. So here's the schedule here. We'll be publishing those DEIS and state reports that I talked about here in mid-November. And then we're going to have a 60-day comment period and currently scheduled to have an FEIS ROD in August. So during that time between now and August, we'll be addressing all of the public comments and putting together a final EIS. I'm going to talk a little bit. Yeah, this is a good transition. The first phase of the corridor improvements project is going to be the critical bridges, which are shown in blue on this map. The reason that is because those bridges are in the worst shape on the corridor, and we've been advancing preliminary design in conjunction with the NEPA to give us a little bit of a head start of understanding some of the challenges with those bridges. And also those bridges are fully funded with legislative and BTE funds. So those are the South Platte Bridge over there where the BR.2 and BR.3 is highlighted. We're going to be doing the road between that and the Burlington Bridge, which is BR.4 and BR.5. And then moving on to the railroad bridges, BR.6 and 7, which is Brighton, UPRR and BNSF Bridge. And then BR.8 and .9 is the 60th Avenue BNSF Bridge. Moving back up to that slide, sorry. There we go. Yeah, moving back up to the gray, the phase 0. One of the things we've been doing in conjunction with this EIS is making sure that the corridor remains safe and doing a lot of bridge preventative maintenance projects. So those are shown in gray there. We've completed a few of these, like the BPM bridge overlays 25478, the BPM York shoring 26438. We're doing the corridor wide NEPA and the critical bridge pre-construction, like I talked about. And then that BPM I-270, I-25 dip is actually going out to add today. So that 26067, anyone who's ever driven that section of a road knows that there's a large dip at the bridge that is currently signed, warning people to make sure they watch their speed there. So we're putting that out to bid, and we'll be doing that as a CADX because it's that section of roadway is not going to be widened within the I-270 corridor improvements project, but it needs to be addressed for the general safety. And then also a separate project is State Highway 224, which runs under I-270, where we'll be doing sidewalks from I-25 to Vasquez with lighting and ADA accessible improvements. So that is also we're using the strategic funds to fund that multimodal aspect of the State Highway 224 project. Okay, we can move on to the next. So this is a little bit in flux. Maybe I can share my screen real quick. I've redlined this slide today. Can everybody see my screen now? Okay, I'm getting head nods. I think we're good.
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
So we are currently working on getting the DEIS and state reports. They're ready for posting. We got a couple edits to make and some to the state reports and some 508 compliance things to finalize, which we're very, very close on. But during the week of 11/17, we'll be ready to post that. We need to have a high level discussion with Federal Highways and CDOT just to understand when the best time to publish those on the website is, because there is a notice of availability process that EPA publishes, which starts the official comment period. So we're trying to thread that needle and make sure that we post it at the right time. With all this going on, the thing I wanted to communicate to the team here, the committee here, is that originally I mentioned that we'd be having public hearings in early December. We've moved all of those public hearings to early January 2026 after the holidays. So as soon as I get those dates, I'll share it, and we'd like, for you to, if you have stakeholders that you know about that would be interested in attending those public hearings, to spread the word and get as many participants as possible to that public hearing. And then mid to late January is when that official 60-day comment period would end, assuming that the NOA gets posted in mid-November. So this is all in flux. As soon as I have final dates, I can send it out. I'll let you take back over the screen. There's going to be multiple ways to comment on the public, on the DEIS and the state reports. You can speak at the public hearings that I was just talking about. There'll be a court reporter there who will record your comments. You can either give a public comment or go to the court reporter and talk to them individually. We'll have comment boxes and forms at the hearing. We're also going to be publishing the NOA at about 6 or 7 repositories around this Denver and Commerce City, where people can look at hard copies of the DEIS and state reports, and there'll be comment boxes there. You can submit online comments. You can email. You can call the hotline. I don't know why that bullet says no life-threatening injuries. That must have been a typo. Excuse that. And then you can also mail it to the office that I work out and bring it to my attention at 4670 North Hawley Street. So once again, we'll hand out flyers and that you'll be able to share with your stakeholders that may be interested in this project with all this information ready. And that's one of my action items to send to you all. And then the next slide, I just wanted to leave some time for questions. So this right here is a overview of the corridor and what we're doing on a big picture level with the improvements on the corridor. Any questions from the group?
But your sound is coming in and out. I'm not sure why.
Oh, my sound?
Yeah, you might want to repeat what you said about this slide. We didn't really catch much of it.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah, I was just saying, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. This image shows just the overall improvements that we're making.
Okay. Any questions on the project for him? Jacob.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. David, Jacob Rieger from DRCOG. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for this presentation and for the tour that you did the other day. I know that my staff appreciated participating in it. I do have a question for you on this slide. Actually, it's hard for folks to see, but we have it in the packet. But on the sort of northeast corner, so to speak, the upper right corner of the slide, when it talks about the mainline improvements, it talks about adding 1 lane in each direction that could be either general purpose or express lane. Could you clarify that?
Yeah, this slide is what we used prior to having a preliminary identified preferred alternative. With the DEIS being published, it will say what the preliminary identified preferred alternative is, whether it is that general purpose or express lane.
Which one is it?
It is, we have started sharing this. It is going to be the express lane alternative.
Okay. Thank you.
Which is what's currently modeled within DRCOG's RTP.
Which is, why I'm asking.
Brian.
So this is like a 7.1 mile stretch. What are the average travel times now, and what are they expected to be after the completion?
Yeah, good question. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head right now, but I do know that they'll be in our transportation section of the report that we're going to be publishing in a few months. So let me write that down as a question, and I can respond once. talk to my traffic engineer that did the modeling and get you accurate numbers.
I guess to follow on to that, if it's just going to be express lanes in each way, I mean, obviously expense is the main contributor, but did you look at adding, I mean, obviously you did on that previous slide, adding a regular lane plus an express lane, and what were the constraints around that?
Yeah, if you move up to that previous slide where we talk about alternatives. There we go. Yeah, there was a evaluation of 3 general purpose lanes and 1 express lane. So that would add a general purpose lane and an express lane in each direction. Our traffic modeling while we were going through the screening process showed that that creates a major bottleneck at each end, at the I-25 connection and at the I-70 connection. Even with the direct connects that are also within the RTP, it creates a bottleneck that actually slows traffic down. So the sweet spot based off of our traffic modeling was the addition of 1 lane, and adding more than that would have created the adverse effect that we were looking for. So that's why they didn't move into the detailed analysis.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I know for freight, that's a major corridor for the freight industry and moving stuff throughout the state that comes in and out of there for processing and different things. So it's an important corridor for the state. A lot of our ag products move into that area for processing and things. So it is critical for everybody in the state to get this moving forward. And hopefully it can address that congestion issue. At the freight meeting, there was concern with DRCOG presented getting freight input. And there was some concern about not looking at freight expansion with some of the areas that are seeing the substantial growth and just trying to continually push more services onto the existing state infrastructure. So it's a concern of the freight industry that they're not truly looking at the needs of moving stuff in and out of these major freight distribution centers that are being built and developed over the next, that have been developed and that are being developed in the next 10 years. So it's a concern to meet those needs on a statewide basis, as Denver is the main hub for most of that. So hopefully we can address those concerns of the freight industry so that they can get their goods in and out in an effective manner, because we're not seeing the reduction in vehicle miles traveled that's been promised. So thank you. Okay, any other comments for 270? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our STAC work program development for 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As this may be one of our last meetings for the calendar year, that will be another item for discussion at the end of the meeting on what to do for December. We do want to start thinking about what kind of topics that that members of the STAC would like to bring forward as either presentations, as we saw with the 270 item, or potential items for discussion throughout to 2026, so we can help develop somewhat of a work plan as we have done the past, gosh, Aaron, 3-4 years, and looking at some of these topics so we can adequately prepare for it. When we put together the STAC materials, we usually have we have a meeting with the chair, vice chair, I believe, 2 weeks ahead of time, and there's limited time from the staff space in order to get that going. So the more heads up that we have in order to help plan things out, that helps us be able to adequately prepare and bring information to this group. We'll note that there are some items that are pre-built into it. Of course, the item at the end of the agenda, 10-year plan, that will probably be taking up some of our time in January and February. The budget recommendation from STAC to the Transportation Commission on the budget does come up November, and Jeff is still here. I think March is the final budget. All right. So those are two items that will definitely be on the agenda. And then this item that we have after the current one, which is the allocations on the rural planning assistant grants, which of course goes to pay for travel and administration purposes for all of our rural TPRs here that we'll discuss to approve that potential budget. We're trying to get ahead of the end of the fiscal year and get the contracting piece done as soon as possible, but that will be a topic from there. So I think that's the end of my preamble to this topic, and we can go into the next slide. And I think I kind of went through this slide, so let's go to the next one. So these are some of the anticipated items that we have for 2026, but of course this is an open an opening for any other potential items throughout the fiscal year, or excuse me, the calendar year. Some items that we may not have seen before, such as the aeronautics update. I don't think that was something we've done before, and I think that was well received. But we do have STAC officer elections that, based off of the bylaws of the STAC, will occur in May of 2026. That was actually, it's been 2 years already, Chair. So the 10-year plan, of course, as I mentioned, the 4-year STIP, that occurs around April-May timeframe. The annual budget briefings, we have done CDOT engineering region project updates in the past. Where if that's a recommendation, we can bring that forward, and then some of our major transit projects that are coming up on there as well. Plus all of the items that we usually do before the break, those are standing items as we'll kind of bring forward on there. I think this is our only slide that we have on this, so it's kind of an opening up to see what potential topics that members of the STAC would like staff to look at bringing forward in potentially bringing forward a work plan the next time we meet well, if we meet in December, we probably won't have it ready, but at least in January, we'll have the list of items ready and be able to create that plan for the next calendar year. So with that, Mr. Chair, other than the items that we have mentioned on the screen, opening it up for suggestions from members of the committee.
Are there other topic areas people would like to see addressed or brought up?
So I have a couple. One, I think, I guess as a general thought, I would like to see STAC becoming more like advisory and less just like informative sessions. So I think in thinking about that, would like others' ideas on how to make that happen. But two things that I think could be really helpful is on the legislative reports. I know you guys do a great job of giving us legislative reports. I would like to see reports on all things related to transportation, whether it just affects CDOT or it also affects like MPOs, local governments, that sort of thing. And then I would also like to see those be more of a discussion so that we're actually like digging into them a little bit more instead of just like, here's the legislative bill or whatever. I'd like to see more discussion on how those are going to impact us. And I guess use this as more of a forum maybe to get together and share ideas and kind of try to work through some of these legislative bills that like we're having, like I'll just do, is it Senate Bill 2530, which is like very frustrating for many MBOs right now. And so it's like thinking back, if we could have discussed that and maybe made a formal comments on some of the issues that we see as like the implementers of this and the ones who live in this world day by day. I think we could be more influential and actually make recommendations that make better bills and that have an intent that we understand. So I think that's one thing. The other thing I would like to see more discussion on is like busting and the planning of busting and the promotion of busting. And I know I've heard like multiple complaints and feedback about, like how are we treating busting riders? Are we making them nice? Are we giving them nice places to wait for the bus? I know our transportation commissioner was upset 'cause it's like in Durango, the shelter is closed and people are waiting in sub-zero temperatures for a bus staying ride. And so just like thinking through that as people that are, you know, maybe more in the weeds and talking to riders. And I know we've done promotions, you know, for busing, trying to promote the service, but it's like, how are we making that as good of a service as possible? And planned in a way that's useful for passengers so that like we're spending this money in a way that's really impactful. So those are, I think, two things that I would like to see.
I would tag on, you took mine, Dana, Mustang. I think because I hear expansion, then I hear possible contraction of the service. And I guess maybe just to audit current service levels, you know, what the fees are to ride Mustang and whether we are looking to expand it or eliminate some of that service. I've heard both, and just an update would be great. It's an important aspect to the mountain communities. It's my son has ridden it multiple times just and saved that vehicle trip. So.
Can I pull on the thread of the legislative just a bit? Because I think that idea is really good. We have the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. We do have a legislative committee that goes over all of our bills. Jared's our awesome legislative person who's here today, Jared Werner. But Emily was saying something, I think the governor doesn't like CDOT actively pushing, supporting legislation. Emily, what were you saying about that?
No, so we do support legislation and push legislation on our side, but if it's an external bill that we're not running ourselves, we don't usually take a formal position on it until it's been introduced. But after it's been introduced, we absolutely engage in bills. So I'm at the Capitol testifying, you know, taking support, oppose, neutral positions on bills for sure.
So that is something that we could do you think, in this forum, is sit and discuss those bills a little bit more in depth? I know that you've sent out to us before legislative reports with transportation bills. I know we discuss a lot of them in depth at PPACG. I just don't want to put CDOT staff in a position that they don't want to be in, but I love the idea.
So if I could, Vice Chair Williams, I believe these are in the bylaws. If I get them wrong, I apologize, but if agreed, we can form committees of the STAC if needed as well.
One of the things we've had in the past, one of the things we've had in the past is a listing of the bills and a small report on each one of those, and those are sent out to the staff, not as part of the meeting so much as ahead of the meeting, so that if we really wanted to talk about them, we can. And so I think that was very helpful. And we didn't want to be surprised like we were in the past. And so we want to take a more proactive choice rather than a reactive choice.
Yeah, I think this forum is a good place to bring some of that forward to try to help improve the legislation that comes through. So that.
But what we might be looking at is a subcommittee, because you know, in those last, well, I don't know if the legislature moves slow anymore. It doesn't seem like they, you know, I thought they were done in March last year and then they did all that stuff afterwards. We meet once a week, PPACG, and I will say for our two committee chairmen plus Jared, I think it's a pretty heavy lift, but we might be looking at a subcommittee if you all want to meet once every 2 weeks or something to follow that. And then in the last couple of weeks of the legislative session, be meeting once a week as MPOs and TPRs to go over it, because those last couple of weeks are when the strange stuff shows up. So, and that's when you miss out on words, and then you have to go back and do cleanup legislation next year. So I think that we're certainly open to a proposal, and maybe we could discuss that more if anyone wants to write up a proposal in January. Dana. Okay, we love the idea.
Yeah.
I don't know as if anyone can afford more meetings, so that's the only problem, is how we do it without, you know, making a weekly or a semi, you know, every 2 week meeting.
Yeah, and I think we're open to having more conversation about what the bills are during the STAC meetings.
I hesitate getting into a committee meeting because I know what it's like down at the Capitol. And to ask Emily to participate in an additional meeting every 2 weeks to report out really what all of the bills are, I think is probably unfair to ask her to do that. I think it is fair to give you the information like we've tried to do in the past of what the bills are, and then let you all have a conversation, which could then lead to some great talking points that Emily can use down at the Capitol. So I think those are good things. I also hesitate, some of the struggle that we have is with the fact that our positions are vetted through the governor's office. We get approval from them. So I hesitate because sometimes we'll get under some pressure from STAC or even the Transportation Commission to do something in particular on a bill. And I don't want that to become uncomfortable for us or from Emily when we have to follow what the governor's guidance is. And I don't want you all to get frustrated that we're doing that, which may or may not coincide with what the conversation is here at STAC. But I think having a broader conversation so everybody can provide some input on what they're experiencing, like Emily talked about the MMOF and what those impacts are. Those are the kinds of things that I think would be great to bring to this group.
I was also going to mention, I know since some of you do have legislative committees or do your own reports, I bet we could also figure out a way that when I send my weekly reports, if you want to send your reports too, we could, have sort of a universal list where, all the MPOs are reporting out on what they're tracking. So if there's something I'm missing because it doesn't impact CDOT, but one MPO or one TPR is tracking it because it would impact them, then it could alert other folks to the, something that they might need to be looking at.
And we'll try to open that up more. And then part of it comes back to the members just speaking up more too during the presentations. So, and voicing those at that point. So, other member, Brian.
So there's one stretch of road that affects all of us, and I would love to get a report or a plan, and that's Pena Boulevard. It's constantly filled with traffic, and we all use the airport. So I'd love to get an update on what CDOT's plan is to improve that. And then the other, we all have a million projects, and there's not a million or an infinite amount of dollars. So what can we do? What kind of brainstorming can we do to get voter approved fees or taxes, or how do we get CDOT more money so that we can get the roads up to par with our neighboring states? So maybe kind of a workshop on that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to, just to point on Pena Boulevard, that is a city street. That is not a state highway. So that's up to Denver. And that was one of the topics with the freight advisory group. That I was
Fair
on.
enough, but it still affects
But
all
it's-
of us.
With the development that's going on there and they're talking of not wanting to expand, it's like, how can you put that many more people and have an airport going to 100 million passengers passing through? I mean, it's just, sometimes you have to have capacity expansion. Right. Agree.
Going off with Brian, we're going to be looking at a reauthorization of our transportation bill next year. So I feel like that should be a topic that we're staying in communication on so that we can help support one another when we're needing to submit comments back to our federal delegation on, what our needs are, not just from a CDOT perspective, a state perspective, but even local perspectives.
That brings up something I have to say. On the surface transportation reauthorization at the federal level, we went back with our Colorado Springs Chamber of Commerce and with Jared here, and we spoke to all of our federal representatives. Colorado, Arizona, Texas are all getting shorted on those formulas. What's happened is, as they've added congressional districts, they have gone back and stayed with the 2001 formula. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that means we, a state that has grown in population, are shorted federal transportation dollars. That is something we can all get on board with, and we can certainly send you a summary sheet on that. We can have it out for the next meeting so that when you see your state, your congressman or anyone in your federal delegation, but especially Congressman Hurd, who sits on the Transportation Committee, that you say, what are we going to do? Our proposal was simply to do a study to fix it. His was, well, if it's a problem, why don't we just fix it and forget the study? And so then we were going to go out and look to the Texas Transportation Institute to do the study, someone who could pay for it. But he just wants to see it fixed. So when that comes up, you know, I think we can easily get the Colorado delegation on board as long as we can get Congressman Hurd on board. So.
Yeah, federal authorization is a big one that we need to keep on top of.
And I'll just say, we appreciate John Leosados's work and Andy's work on that, because they've gotten data from other states and said, can you translate that into Colorado? And then we translate it back, and then you can carry that back for us along with when we do that. So appreciate the partnership. And I agree with authorization. We want to have a partnership. So those are all good ideas. Dana.
So I know I've gotten emails and voicemails, but I'd like to talk over in the next couple of months at least about Policy Directive 1601, which is the interchange request for interchange access. And this is something we've been working on for several years for an interchange, but I think just like the philosophical view of it, there's a lot of TDM requirements, and I don't know others have experience with this, but there's a lot of TDM, or not a lot, there's 2 TDM requirements. One is a reduction on the ramps of 3%. And then the other one is like this scorecard that you have to pick some things. I think for like, I was not involved a lot in this process because I think it was like right when I started and I really had no idea what I was doing. But it didn't seem like there was a huge process to make these changes or add this stuff. I don't know. But I think about the greenhouse gas rule, and there was like so much input. It was very well thought out. It was a lot of participation. And it seems to do a lot of the things that 1601 intended, but like at a system level. So we're looking at, you know, reducing VMT and, you know, trying to increase travel choices and that sort of thing. But it does it at a system level. And as I like dig into this more and more, this is very specific. This policy directive is very specific to the site. And so in our case, it's very difficult to do reductions on the ramps because there's no development around it. So it's like, well, how do you tell people to use it less? You can put in some redundancy and that sort of thing. But one example I always use is like, well, we want to put park and rides on this ramp, but if we do that, it will actually increase people using the ramp because they have to get off, park their car, and then get back on. But like as a system, it's much better because they're sharing rides for longer distances. So like it doesn't really address the goals. You know, I think the intent of the bill was great. I just think like now we have something better with the greenhouse gas rule. When I look at the scorecard as well, I think about some of the things, and I won't go through all of them, but when I think about like adding transit, when I look at our system and our limited transit funding, I'm like, this isn't where we would want to put transit. That would not be the best use of our transit dollars. So I think just stepping back a little and maybe giving it a little bit different view. And I know CDOT staff is working on it, and I'm happy to meet with anybody and talk about it. But I think just like looking at a little bit bigger picture, like what is the intent and are we doing that in the best way and not just trying to now comply with this directive that was great when it came out or it was useful, but now like we have more directives and not just like piling directives on directives and making it more difficult and more expensive, to be honest, a lot more expensive and take a lot longer time to try to comply with like these different levels. So, and I know that it's the policy directive said review by April of 2026. So I do think that seems pretty close. So I'd be curious too to see like what the schedule is for that.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. And we've emailed back and forth, and I left you the voicemail that you referred to. We are starting to look at 1601. We can workshop that with the STAC probably in January, since you won't have a December meeting. I can say the difficulty here is what we're trying to do with the 1601 TDM requirements is get people to think and act differently than maybe they otherwise would. And I don't think no matter what we do with with the policy or procedural directive, I don't think that's going to change. But when you bring up things like, well, gosh, are you pitching things that may actually increase traffic on ramps, but it's good for the system? Those are the kinds of things like a park and ride ought to reduce traffic overall. But if it increases traffic on the ramps, well, what does that mean? And how do we consider that in the whole picture? Those are the kinds of things that I think would be great to get some input on, for sure. Yeah, so I'll commit to us working SHOP 1601 through its conclusion. Yep.
In general, in regards to policy directives, I know that had been a topic of discussion. We do want when a policy directive goes to TC, a recommendation, unless it is one of the items where it's a very minor change to it. So I'll give the example that you can correct me if I'm wrong, Herman. I don't think we've had any policy directives go to TC other than the one for this that's going to come up to this month on workplace violence, which I think that's probably not one we would want to discuss on there. But noting that those have not come forward yet to the TC for a major change or discussion, that may be items that we come up on there. And the 1601 example, piggyback on what you said, Herman.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, because I know that the chair and I have had that conversation in the past too. We do intend to bring policies and procedures that have impact on kind of the greater system. When it's something like our employee recognition procedures or our processes for workplace violence, we're not going to bring those to STAC. But when it's something like PD 14 or this PD 1601 that actually has impact and we could use some input, we will reach out and have that input with you all.
Yeah, on the policy directives, I would just ask that possibly when those are going to be coming up, ask for input from STAC at the beginning so that you can get some feedback of issues that areas may be seeing with them, so that those can be considered as it's written and not wait until there's been a recommendation fully written going to commission. I think getting some of that feedback early to try to address things through the staff process early may help. Like we said with legislation, the more earlier we can engage, the better we can make things actually work to be more efficient and better for the system. So I would ask that with the policy directives also that affect the planning regions. Bring it to us to get input early and then to give feedback once you've kind of written out the policies, but kind of have a two-layer. Because I can see issues of opening it up fully to STAC to get fully involved, but making sure we can have that feedback early and not wait till the end when we feel like we can't really have a meaningful input.
And I think on 1601 too, if there's specific ramps that are giving you problems, I just love the Air Force Academy entrance ramp where they have the lights are going off at different times. So if you're in the right lane, you go, then you're in the left lane, you go. But anything, if there's a specific ramp that's backing up, I think we need to email staff and let them know to see if they can problem solve without going into the policy directive. Because I think going into the policy directive is going to be a very hot topic. And so if you see a specific problem area, if these rotating lights at the down in Colorado Springs have worked, then let's see if they work in your area too. Because they've been really effective on this one specific location. And there might be a few others I haven't noticed that might need it down there too. So.
Other topics for our work plan for the next year. Did want to touch base meeting days. Okay. We still good on Thursday mornings, first Thursday. And in person, do we still just want to do 2 a year? Do we want to do quarterly in person or any preferences on that? We're currently doing 2. We do normally October and May.
It depends a little bit on what the topic of discussion is. Like if we're getting into 1601 and wanting to really formulate some ideas, in person is the way to go. So maybe whether the in-person drives the agenda or the agenda drives an in-person meeting, I don't know, but it seems like in-person's better for wanting to collaborate more fully.
Right, I would agree, but was kind of where I was. Do we want to maybe switch to having a quarterly that we could then schedule those sorts of meetings quarterly for those sorts of discussions more, where if we're just doing twice a year, it kind of limits.
You know, if we're going to
With
talk
the-
1601 in January, we might want to do it in person. We do seem to be more interactive around the table than we are on Zoom. So.
Yeah, that's also, legislature, but
So we could do January, May, and then see about October, or see if we need something over the summer.
or February, May. I don't know, January, they're just, because we're be the very first part of January.
So maybe it fits with your quarterly recommendation.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we, if we meet in person more often, we might actually get some snow.
We might make it snow, yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's why we've had drought.
Which are those? Has that been calculated differently since we've gone to Zoom meetings? Dropped, or is it?
The amount of money has not dropped. Whether the amount of money used has dropped, that I don't know if I have that offhand, but we can report on that in the future. But we are still allocating, I believe it is 200,000 for the rural planning assistance grants. Travel is a big component of that, and then where a lot of the formula comes from, because it's probably going to cost more for folks in Durango to come here to Denver as part of that. And we do increase the budget for the chair and vice chair to travel to TC every single month because of that. And that's why we do have the in-person meeting in May, is because we do that election. So that way we can get ahead of the fiscal year and appropriately give the TPR who has the chair that additional funding. So they have that increased travel for the TC meeting. But I think if it does become a problem with a particular TPR, we can have that discussion individually, but I don't think that has been so far. And I'm looking towards Marissa and Aaron to see if I got that correct.
Yes, I think looking at the budgets and the expenditures this year, everyone seems to be within their distribution pretty safely, but we can have those conversations if anyone's getting close, especially if you add another meeting or two that's in person.
So I'm kind of hearing maybe schedule quarterly in person. If we need to, we can skip an in person if we don't feel we need in person. So that would be February, May. Does that work out quarterly? Yeah.
October. Yeah. At least next year, maybe February, May, and October.
Yeah.
And then if we need another one, we'll take a train ride in July.
I think also if it's possible to combine it with other things, like we were just talking to Eric Sabina about modeling, and it's like, oh, if we had a modeling meeting after STAC, just something to like, especially for us, because we drive a long ways, and some people travel a long ways, and it's a long ways for just a morning meeting. But if it's combined with something else, then it's like adds value, I think, to the time spent getting here. So I don't know. I know it's not always possible, but I think there could be, even if it's just like meetings. I know one time we had like happy hour the night before or something. And I think that's nice also just to get like MPOs together, or, all of us stacked together to form relationships and network.
At one point, wasn't there a TPR meeting scheduled after STAC?
It was the statewide MPO meeting, and we scheduled that for next week, right? The Thursday following.
All right.
I think we had it on Friday. There was like some sort of Friday, and then it didn't work out. So we moved it to the following Thursday after STAC for that on there, and that seems to work out for all of our MPO partners.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, depending on the outcome, we'll have this as a review topic in January to make sure staff has the items that were discussed today and put together the proposed schedule, at least with some of the items, knowing that we may have different months for when items might be ready. And of course, we can amend that as we go forward. So if something comes up in April, we can bring it in like July or August as we know things change for the year. So, but we can at least do our best to plan out what we know now.
All right. Move on to the rural planning assistance allocation.
So while we're bringing this up on here, I'm going to turn it over to Marissa, who's going to go through this just at a very high level. As part of the statewide, state planning and research funds that comes to the state of Colorado as a proportion of our federal allotment, we do give out funds to help with support on the administrative pieces for our TPR partners. So this is trying to get that draft budget. And we're trying to do this as early as possible before the beginning of the fiscal year so we can get out the purchasing documents and we don't have any of these major gaps. So we've made a lot of changes internally from our my division that helps manage that program to try and avoid these types of pieces, such as having next year's funding in the current year, SPR work program, for example, so we can kind of make sure it's as seamless as possible. But it now seems to be the appropriate time to discuss these proposed planning budgets. So with that, now that these slides are up, I'm going to turn it over to Marissa, who's going to go through this topic.
Thanks, Darius. Let me go to the next slide. I think we've covered some of this already, but again, the rural planning assistance funding is federal funding that we set aside to support rural planning activities. And we're budgeting up to almost 200,000, 198,000 to be very specific in our fiscal year 2027 work program. And I think Darius spoke through the rest, but it is federal funding. We adhere to those rules, but we've made it available again to support your rural planning activities. If you want to go to the next slide. Our goals are pretty simple with this funding. It's basically to ensure that your TPR has enough funding for the basic rural planning administration duties required. So about 3 years ago, we re-examined the formula for the distributions and updated it with that goal in mind. So there is now a minimum base that each TPR receives for rural planning. I think that's set at $8,000. And then we add on from there based on the distance of your TPR from CDOT headquarters, again, to accommodate the travel associated to meetings such as this, that's in person. We provide additional funding to TPRs that have more duties, like being the STAC chair or vice chair. And then we account for TPRs like the Southwest TPR that also has administration duties for tribal nations. So you want to go to the next slide. Probably can't read this, it's pretty small, but in summary, the distributions we're proposing are going to stay the same. My team and I reviewed the expenditures of this year, and it looks like every TPR is pretty safely within their budget. Looks like they're at about where they should be. So we're just recommending that the distribution stay consistent with what we budgeted in fiscal year 26. But we can talk with you. Please reach out if you're thinking you might, based on travel, need more, or we can do we can look more deeply into it. But I think everyone's seems pretty secure with the allocation. So I think we got it pretty close when we recalculated the formula a few years ago. Next slide. So this is just some reminders that these contracts start July 1st of every year and go to June 30th. This is the state fiscal year. So it's great that we're having this discussion today. This gives us a lot of time to plan ahead and make sure that we have these POs executed by July 1st. We do request that reimbursements are submitted quarterly at a minimum. The last day to submit invoices for any given period is September 30th, which is 3 months after the close of the last of June 30th. So you have about 3 months to get in your final invoice after the PO expires on June 30th. We do not carry over any unexpended funding to the following year, so just know that. That returns to the pool, and then we reallocate it in a new contract every July 1st. Kathleen Collins on my team does an excellent job of hosting, I think really pretty regular. I think we've been doing quarterly or twice a year TPR administrators meetings. So we're looking to have another one probably in the spring. So she'll be reaching out. We'll be reaching out to you to schedule that. I think that's all I have. Any questions?
If I could, Mr. Chair, just to add on to the item, what we're asking for today is approval on the recommendation that has brought forward on 2 slides back. So we'll bring that up forward on there, and note that we can have a further conversation if there's any issues with the funding pieces during the year, reaching out to the DTD staff, and that if there is the TPR administrator meetings, that helps out with some of the more technical aspects of this to try and navigate the federal funds and making sure that we invoice items correctly and all those other pieces. So that has been successful. And we did increase this when we redid this formula from 150,000 to 200,000 3 years ago, knowing that we hadn't touched it in a long time. And there was more duties that have been provided, and we're getting into the next planning cycle, which we're getting close to the end on here. So that's going to be, in conclusion, that's going to be the ask for today, is the approval of this, so that way we can get started on working on the FY27 distributions and have those ready to go on July 1. Oh, thank you.
So is there a motion to recommend the distribution?
I have a question, Chair. Yeah. I'm curious, is the funding flexible? Like if one TPR doesn't use near all their allocation and there's another that goes over, can it move from TPR to TPR, or how does that work?
I think there is a discussion that we would want to have with that piece on there. There is some flexibility on there, but there is some reporting mechanisms that we need to take into place. Any changes to what is put into our state planning and research work plan, which is required under federal statute, does have to go through an amendment process with the Federal Highway Administration. So if there is a change that would happen mid-year, we would need to do that. We submit amendments quarterly, September, December, so on and so forth, but we can have those conversations on a case-by-case basis.
Which, does this show chair and vice chair adjustments?
There are no adjustments from fiscal 20.
So yes, it does include the extra allocation to Eastern, and unfortunately, I think Pikes Peak and North Front Range, right? The ones that don't, okay. Pikes Peak and North Front Range don't have rural areas, so they don't have an allocation to this particular pot. So it's just Eastern who gets the extra allocation for this year.
Does Eastern look similar to the others? That was just wasn't sure what Eastern would have been without the chair, so.
I mean, we can talk to you, Gary. I think we also base it at sort of what you're spending. So if
Yeah, I
you-
don't think it's an issue.
Yeah.
I just was.
So I don't know exactly
Trying to keep
what the
it small.
difference is, but I think it varies depending on
Just looking at distance.
how much more spending that might be or what you're spending now too.
And I think the best example is if Southwest was to become the chair, so to speak, then that would increase from the 26,000, because I think they're the ones that have the most on here based off the distance, but and they have the 2 travel nations, so that may increase as well. So yeah, we can talk about that from the items that we had previously.
Okay, so I think we're ready for approval of the RPA distribution formula.
I think Brian's really good to make this motion since I'm not included on this chart. I think you two should.
I would move to approve the allocation.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the 2027 RPA distribution. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're on to the draft 10-year plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate everybody's patience as we go through some of these items, and we will send out this particular presentation. So we're probably going to have a number of presentations on the 10-year plan before we get to adoption, which will be the last slide that we'll get into this on here, but wanted to give a preview of what we'll be taking a look at in terms of looking at the finalization with the 10-year plan. And I know that you probably have had conversations with with each of the staff in the regions in order to develop this. And we'll be starting that with a presentation to commission in a couple of weeks, focusing on the western slope. But and then kind of going through that as we go through the other regions up until adoption in the late spring. Right now, we're looking at about March-ish timeframe. But wanted to start what we will talking about some of the accomplishments, talking about and giving some preview of what we'll be seeing on there, and then filling it out with the schedule. As we continue with these workshops and presentations, and before we get to the adoption, making sure that we'll have the information to this group as well, and probably an action item for a recommendation to the Transportation Commission before that adoption comes forward to them. And so this will kind of go through some of these items because we haven't talked about the 10-year plan in a couple of months as we've been working through that. So that's the preamble right now as folks are passing out this presentation here. So I'm going to go through some of these items, which may have been some repeats on here before, but as we get closer towards the end of the presentation, there will be some preview items. Next slide, please. So I think I kind of went through that, so we can go on to the next slide. This is just the agenda piece. So with your recommendation, the Transportation Commission did take action on the statewide transportation plan in September. That was adopted. So that is just the beginning. As mentioned in the reports, there are the regional plans that have been adopted from our rural TPR partners. Our MPO partners, of course, have their own schedules, and some of those have been approved in this year. Some of them will be approved next year. Some of them were approved 2 years ago, but we're now getting towards the end of this planning cycle and looking at the refresh of the 10-year plan. And I believe that there has been engagement with you and your staff from the regional level to take a look at projects in those individual regions. So next slide, please. Again, this is kind of visualizing what we just said, what I just said on there. So we had the regional plan development and the action on those plans, the action on the statewide plan, which also includes during this cycle items that have come forward. The transit plan, we have the active transportation plan. That one is not required, but it is one of those total plans to help feed into the larger plan. And then we've taken a look at the 10-year plan, which will then feed into the 4-year STIP, the federal required document that helps allocate those funds within that 4-year period. And then, of course, the budget also actually provides those allocations in the different line items, which was the topic a couple of hours ago. Next slide, please. Won't spend too much time on this, but we're hoping that this was successful in helping inform not only the development of the transportation plans, but helping decide on the priorities, which is instead of printing out stacks and stacks of maps like we did 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever it was putting that into an app that's publicly available and having information that we have that is useful in developing these plans and the 10-year plan, including usage, conditions, safety, transit, where current projects are, and so on and so forth. And so open to suggestions on how we can make that better and how we can continue with this, because we know that once we adopt this, it doesn't just stop. We have to be ready for the next cycle and everything that comes in between it. And we want to continue the providing information as we continue with implementing the plan. Next slide, please. I think this is probably a slide we've used before, but just the public outreach, building on what was done in 2045, which was a very hard reset, but also some going out where we had meetings with all of us at the table and all of your local government partners that counted at least 110 meetings, if not more. We had the telephone town halls that the commission participated in. We had 9 of those for all 11 commission districts. We had 50,000 people participate in them, plus the information provided through the surveys and the web pages. Next slide, please. Again, a little bit of a repeat, but the goals for the planning cycle as approved by the commission, looking at fixing our roads, transportation safety, and sustainably increasing transportation choice, and how we can help measure some of the performance on there. And I do apologize for this. The performance measures for the fix our roads and advancing transportation safety should be reversed on there. So those makes more sense when those go into the other buckets. Next slide, please. The GHG transportation standard, we did have conversations about this throughout the entire process on this new item that came in mid-cycle, at least for the state, in the last planning cycle, but taking that into consideration on looking at developing plans to help reduce GHG emissions as required under 2 CCR 60122 and in the Senate Bill 260/21-260 from 4 years ago. So we are currently developing our GHG transportation report for the areas outside of the MPO boundaries, and we'll be presenting that to the commission a little bit later on in the coming months. And then, of course, we'll give an update to STAC as well with that piece. And our MPO partners have been doing theirs with all of the MPOs doing theirs with the exception of Pueblo, and we'll be looking at that in the coming months. Next slide, please. So this slide is one of the ones that we have shown before, but just the transition on how the previous plan will look to the current plan, and we do break it up in these 4-year chunks because in the years, the sooner years, for lack of a better term, there is more certainty in funding. As we get to the out years, it is estimates. And one of the big questions, as mentioned in the previous topic, is the federal reauthorization bill, which can change some of these, change the funding mix a little bit. And thus we do sort of a mini refresh in order to take a look at the next 4 years year period, which will be one of the items that will be part of the mid-cycle changes on there. But for right now, instead of having a 27 plus that you see in those documents, we'll be having a 4-year prioritized allocation of those strategic funds from years 27 through 30, and then now a 31 plus in the new plan. Next slide. In terms of funding, I believe this was presented a couple of months ago, but just as a reminder on what the anticipated funding from the strategic funding pot that is available to help support the 10-year plan, around 225 million available annually. So that essentially equates to around 900 million available in the first 4 years, and then the out years, 1.35 billion in strategic funds. But all of our projects oftentimes are helped out through our enterprises or other funds in order to help get the projects the funds they need as we build out those pieces, build out the plans of the projects going forward. Next slide, please. This is the allocation percentage by CDOT region, based off of the allocation formula that was approved by the Transportation Commission, breaking out the 900 million into what goes into each of our engineering regions. And then, of course, there is the small set aside, about 6 million annually, that will go for busting capital, and that's for maintenance of the fleet. So the buses, the maintaining those new bus purchases and everything else to help support that program going forward into the next 10 years. Next slide, please. This is one of the new pieces, and this has been the work over the past couple of months by the staff out in the CDOT regions, was working with you and with our local partners in order to identify what are, based off of the funding constraint that we have with the 10-year plan, what are the priorities in terms of that we would want to be able to bring forward into the 10-year plan, from not only your plans, whether it's the TPR plans that are being adopted now, from the MPO plans, from input that we've seen through 4P county meetings and others, through our asset management needs, and what is in the current 10-year plan, and will be carrying over oftentimes the items that had the 27 plus funding distribution, and working collaboratively to get to a list and being able to provide consensus on this, so you're able to see that. So we're able to see those plan of projects when we present it more widely, and formalize it through the Transportation Commission and our public out through a public comment process. Next slide, please. I won't spend too much time on this slide here, but to give into context, we are talking large figures, but the one thing that we have seen when we've talked about the 10-year plan, it is not our only program. It's not the construction program as a whole. There is many other programs such as asset management, many of our safety programs, faster safety, the highway safety improvement program, and our enterprises that also help support the overall capital construction program. And we do want to make that distinction and be able to help provide that information as part of this next 10-year plan, to note that these are probably some of our higher profile projects, but it's not everything that the department does. Next slide, please. For example, our asset management program, when we take into account our maintenance forces and the bridge and tunnel enterprise, which is the main enterprise that supports asset management, we spend annually around $870 million on the asset management program, largely outside of the 10-year plan. So the 10-year plan often supplements what we're not able to get done through asset management because of the limited funds we have, and be able to do more things with our 10-year plan funds. Next slide, please. Okay. If there is any questions on that, that's largely a lot of stuff that we have already talked about, but do want to get into some examples of accomplishments that have happened in the current plan, that have come out of each of the regions on here. Some of these projects may be going forward. They're still under construction, such as the one we have on the screen right now. Some of the projects may have been done completely. We've delivered the project and they are open to the public, but I'm just going to give a couple of examples on here as we go forward. Happy to provide more information on any of the projects in the current plan, especially the ones marked complete, if need be. And I apologize, I got a little bit ahead in my notes here. All right, so Floyd Hill. So this is one of our larger projects. This is looking at reducing bottlenecks and increasing safety on I-70 from Evergreen to Idaho Springs. Looking at it's going to fill a 2-mile, in addition to helping with the making the roadway safer and helping to reduce that kind of bottleneck on there. We've had there's some other pieces of other improvements, including 2-mile frontage road gap and improving how we route emergency vehicles and helping with wildlife crossing and fencing. As we've heard from comments on our statewide plan, making sure that we address wildlife collisions has been a big piece, and we do want to acknowledge that on how we're able to handle that. And this is one of the examples that's on there. Plus, being able to show the statewide commitment of funding to projects like this helps us secure federal grants. For example, this particular one, and Jordan, you feel free to correct me, $100 million in federal grants for this particular project, because we're able to show the commitment we have on here, and thus we're able to be successful when we go out and ask for these types of federal grants to support projects like this. Next slide, please. Another example of a project that is that we're currently working on, and another one that was able to receive a federal grant in Region 1 is the US 6 and Wadsworth Boulevard interchange. So trying to modernize that interchange and improve safety for travelers of all modes, and being able to address concerns that we've heard about from folks in the neighborhood on being able to help with some of the frontage roads that follow along US 6 on there, and reduce noise impacts and improve the noise walls in those areas. And then this one received a $20 million raise grant because of the funding commitment we provided in the 10-year plan. Next slide, please. An example from Region 2. The Military Access, Mobility, and Safety Improvement Project, MAMSIP. So this included benefits to Fort Carson, Peterson Space Force Base, and Schreiber Space Force Base. Still looking at mobility and safety along I-25 with new concrete, so improving the pavement while we are already out there, full 12-inch shoulders, improved access in many of these areas, replacing 2 bridges in there, and a great example of the collaboration with our local partners in Region 2, and some additional benefits, and being able to improve our intelligent transportation systems along Colorado 94 in that lane, in that area as well. Next slide, please. Region 3, this project, the US 50 Little Blue Canyon. So this project included roadway reconstruction, drainage, access improvements, expanding the shoulders, making sure the roadway is to meet the current geometric design standards, and to modernize that particular roadway, and also taking a look at geohazard and rockfall mitigation work throughout the corridor to improve safety for the traveling public. So, I think this, I think that line on there, the completion of this project represents the culmination of 30 years of operating US 50 between Gunnison and Montrose. And I'm getting Vince having the thumbs up, so that's good on there. All right. Moving on into Region 4, as part of the I-25 project, we had the mobility hub build out along that corridor with the Centerra Loveland station pictured here. We had the 3 hubs, Centerra Loveland, Berthoud, and the Firestone Longmont that can help support Mustang and other local transit services. But the project has been working on reconstruction, safety, and operational improvements along the 26-mile long corridor up in Region 4 there. So that's been one of the projects that has been getting close to completion, if not totally completed. And I'll see. Yeah, see if Heather agrees with my assessment there.
The mobility hubs are completed. The
Oh.
construction is on I-25. It's not completed.
Okay, there we go. Next slide, please. So some of the other projects that have been successful as part of the 10-year plan is improving the condition of our interstate. So 2 examples: I-70 Bethune to Kansas, I-76 ILF to Crook, as working with help augmenting our asset management program, being able to significantly reduce the amount of poor interstate pavement, and making sure that we are within the limits set under the FAST Act for federal poor pavement since we started the 10-year plan. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Local partnerships have been, we mentioned one previously. This has been another successful local partnership, which is the project on Colorado 119, the Diagonal Highway, with all of these agencies in here, including our partners with DRCOG and the cities along there to improve travel time, improve safety, improve transportation choice, and make the corridor more efficient and more accessible to travelers. So, and that one is continuing on as part of our 10-year plan. Next slide, please. And then finally, one of our larger projects in Southwest Colorado, the US 550-160 Connection South project. So this one was the reconstruction of that entire interchange. And was just completed in 2024 at the intersection of the 2 major roads in Southwest Colorado, 550 and 160. Probably one of the larger projects that we had in the plan, which was just recently completed last year, at the end of last year. Actually, we're getting close to a year on there. So with the total project cost of $100 million. Next slide, please. Oh, and one more. Another project looking at making sure that our highway system is resilient and improving asset management is this US 160 McCabe Creek project, which is looking at replacing an old culvert, installation of making sure that when we have extreme weather events, that the highway is still resilient, that the highway is still resilient, and making sure that we modernize the infrastructure near Pagosa Springs down in Southwest Colorado. And so I think that gets into all of the specific accomplishments, and we do want to mention Mustang. I apologize. We have a lot of accomplishments with the 10-year plan. We could spend hours going through that, but just to highlight some of these ones is some of the commitments that we made to Mustang and Mustang expansion with 66 routes statewide, and it has ridership continues to grow since the pandemic, and people are using that service extensively. All right, next slide, please. And then just, I think this slide was also used in the Rural Roads presentation back in September, which was also given to members of the Transportation Legislative Review Committee, is just overall, what are some of the accomplishments through the Rural Roads program in addressing over 800 miles and 41 projects, and adding additional investment on top of the $230 million spent statewide on rural road resurfacing. And then we had one example on here as part of that program, the US 50 Delta Repair roadway project, otherwise known as the Delta Dips project, that was successfully completed as well. Next slide, please. I think we've kind of mentioned examples of improving our bridges and making sure that they're safer and more modern with drainage and making and retaining walls along critical corridors to make sure that we have a resilient highway system. And all of the a lot of our projects are looking at making sure the roads are safer for everyone, including improved intersections, passing lanes, wider shoulders, guardrail, median barrier, clear signage, acceleration, deceleration lanes, supporting freight, truck climbing along some of our mountain corridors, and addressing our mountain tunnels as well. Okay, next slide, please. All right. As we get into the next 10-year plan, we'll be updating the documentation. So being able to see, projects that are still under construction, will be moving forward. Projects that are currently designed or planned in the current 10-year plan, and they have been prioritized. So they may be receiving additional funding, especially if they were previously slated to receive FY27 funding. So those conversations have already happened, and we're kind of culminating into the final steps of this in order to present this package to the Transportation Commission over the next couple months. But also in terms of the documents that will be publicly available is being able to show on what we colloquially call the colorful tables is updated cost estimates and identification opportunities to align with other funding sources, whether it's state or federal, excuse me. And then being able to update our project scopes, descriptions, locations, the statuses, and then anticipated start and end dates of when construction will start for these projects. Okay. All right, preview of what's next. So I'm going to go through this, go through some of the preview of what we will see in the next 10-year plan. And then I do have some help from regional staff if there's questions on specific projects, knowing that this is just a high-level preview, and there'll be we'll have full lists available as we go through these presentations over the next couple of months. So in Region 1, they conducted their 4P process for all the counties within their boundaries in the Denver area, and working with DRCOG's staff and heard about maintenance, safer streets for all, making sure that we can adapt for regional growth and integration of the multimodal infrastructure. And one of the projects that's going to be highlighted is the Federal Boulevard BRT project, which is looking at providing increased transportation choice along this is one of those roads that have, they usually say the highway name, but it has two highway names. So north of Colfax, it's US 287. South of Colfax, it's Colorado 88. Did I get that correct? Yes. Okay. So along those stretch of highway, but also includes making sure we have connection with a lot of our the RTD rail lines, such as the W line, the B line, the D line, and the G line, and providing those gaps between those lines that go out from the central hub at Union Station, and then looking at improvements for active transportation as well. So, and that's going to be one that's going to be working on over the next 4-year period. All right, then let's see here. I'll leave it up if Region 1 wanted to add anything else to my very quick explanation on there, or we can kind of see where some of those other projects went with. So in Region 2, one of the items that's coming forward in the next 10-year plan is the US 50B resurfacing at passing locations. So there was a SHIFT grant that helped build some of the passing lanes, and this project will be looking at not only helping advance two goals with advancing transportation safety as part of those passing lanes, but also fixing the roads so that way we can make sure that we take care of pavement that needs to be addressed as part of that route. And it is a route that is a national highway freight route. And so the benefits of this particular project are being able to not only address asset management needs, address safety needs, but also making sure that it is a route that is heavily traveled by some of our excuse me, got tongue tied there, but it is a heavily traveled freight route is what I was trying to say. Okay. Moving on into Region 3. So some of the projects that are going to be coming forward in the plan include US 48 Red Dirt Hill, which has a nexus with advancing transportation safety. We have I-70 Glenwood Canyon as part of fixing our roads and fixing our assets, and including replacing Type 8 guardrail throughout the canyon there. And then the multimodal improvements on I-70B in Grand Junction, thank you, for making sure that we have a safe travel experience for cars, pedestrians, and cyclists, including reconstructing that highway through, reconstructing that road through the city as well. Next slide, please. In Region 4, this high-level slide goes through the stakeholder engagement strategy for developing their plan and working with the TPRs and MPO partners in Region 4 for developing their 10-year plan recommendations that they'll be bringing forward at a future briefing. Next slide, please. One of those projects they'll be bringing forward is on Colorado 14, the safety improvements in Alt. So looking at addressing crashes, being able to provide transportation choice in multimodal improvements, and also addressing repaving and making sure we have a state of good repair on the roadway as well. Next slide, please. Region 5, some of the projects highlighted in the 3 goal areas includes the US 160 Elmore East Safety and Mobility Project. So another large project in between Durango and Bayfield, in order to make sure that we're able to, where there's been a lot of growth, that we're able to address safety issues along that highway and help address mobility issues that have been identified. A project that is going to be a new rural road resurfacing project is the Colorado 159 State Line project south of San Luis. So being able to repave 17.5 miles of roadway and augment what the department puts into our surface treatment program. And then finally, multimodal improvements on Colorado 145 in locations such as Rico, Sawpit, Placerville, and Norwood, and looking at how we can improve accessibility to active transportation in those locations. All right. Okay. So if there's any questions on those, I'm happy to answer on those specific projects. And of course, that is just a very small subsample of all the projects that are be going into the next 10-year plan, and will be available as part of that as well. Knowing that we're probably going to have we will have probably over 200 projects in the next 10-year plan that will receive funding. And we could talk about all of them, but there's some high-level highlights that we'll have on there. So this is a draft completion schedule. We anticipate adoption in March of this year. Sorry, that did not make sense. March of next year. So that's kind of where we're working backwards from there. So we'll probably continue to have briefings with this committee. We'll have briefings with the Transportation Commission. The prime one is going to be at the November commission. So if you like to watch on that, it is on YouTube. And of course, we're happy to bring back that information. And it's primarily going to be focused on regions 3 and 5. So our Western slope pieces of that, with following up on the Front Range and Eastern Plains at the January commission. The December commission, we won't talk about the 10-year plan extensively because it is a much shorter commission meeting. So some of the other pieces included on there is our requirement under the GHG planning standards. So we're continuing the modeling on that, and we'll probably brief that in January as well, with potential adoption in March. We will have a public comment period, most likely in February, before we take it to adoption. And then of course, we will have a final briefing with this committee on a recommendation before we take the full 10-year plan for adoption to the Transportation Commission, again anticipated in March. So that's kind of like our finalization schedule, working through these winter months on here. I think this is my last slide, correct? All right. So hopefully this was helpful to kind of give a preview on what will be coming up. As part of this process, and we'll continue the conversations, and hopefully the entire picture will be a little bit more clear in March later on this year, and anticipate more continued briefings with this committee, with the Transportation Commission, and if there's any other questions, we of course can take any of those either today or offline as we workshop these recommendations and get towards adoption. And then we can actually execute the program over the next 10 years, which includes putting all of these into the STIP, and then start working on when FY 2027 starts, which will be July 1, when the funding will be available for these projects. So with that, open to any questions, or open to my colleagues in the regions if there's anything that I left out or misspoke and want to correct on there, but hopefully I did your projects justice. So thank you, and if there's any questions.
Any questions, comments? Okay. Look forward to get projects going. All right, other items. We don't think we'll have a December meeting. Commission is going to be a short one-day meeting in December, probably just budget supplement. That's kind of a routine item. So unless you all have some issues you think we need to talk about in December, we'll probably skip December. Not seeing anybody saying we need to talk about this. Okay. No December meeting. That's the way it's looking right now. So you came to your last meeting today, Vince. So, and we'll see everybody in January 8th, I believe.
January 8th, first Thursday is November 1st. We're not meeting then, but we'll do that. We'll plan it out, and based off of the comments that we have today, and make sure we have the appropriate arrangements.
All righty. Anything else? Seeing none? Thank you. We're adjourned.